If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of three. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram at fitnessmama, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. So if you love a good birth story, you're going to love today's episode. I speak with Pam, who was a member inside Fitness Mama, and she's a first-time mum, and she describes her premature rupture of the membranes at 35 weeks. She really takes us on the journey. So she describes her birth, forceps use, sterile water injections, and Pam has a beautiful knack, as I said, of taking us on the actual journey, and you'll feel like you were in the room with her. So yeah, I'm sure you're going to love this episode, and it's actually a rerun of episode number 14. So right back in the early days of the podcast, a few years ago now. So thank you everyone over the journey. Like this episode, I can't believe now that this podcast is over 3 years old, and it's amazing. I love chatting with you all. I love hearing your stories. I love it when you come and DM me and share that you've been listening to the podcast. So thank you to each and every one of you. And also thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends or anyone you know who's pregnant and anyone you think might benefit from listening. It really is one of the best ways to help this podcast grow and reach and help more women just like you. Right, without further ado, let's get into this episode with Pam. Thank you, Pamela, for joining me today.
You're more than welcome.
So Pamela is one of our lovely members inside Fitness Mama, and you are actually one of our founding members nearly 6 months ago. And in what feels like a blink of the eyelids, you suddenly to me, probably not to you, but you've got a gorgeous 8-week-old boy named Gabriel. So Pamela, could you please introduce yourself to all those who don't know you?
I'm Pamela Diaz. I am 33, soon to be 34, first-time mama. I have a husband called Juan, and baby Gabriel is 9 weeks today, yep. But he was premature, came at 35 weeks and 3 days, completely unexpected, obviously.
I remember you saying you didn't have your bags packed and...
I actually did have a hospital bag packed. It was nearly 100% done. I had a couple of things missing. I had a couple of friends telling me, no, get it done. And I was like, I'm not, 33 weeks. Why do I need to get it ready? And thank Christ that I did, because it was so unexpected. My waters broke on a Saturday morning and I had to go to the hospital for observations. And then they said, well, you'll be here for 2 days. And I was like, what do you mean for 2 days? Like, I've just come with, wearing what I've got. And they're like, you need to get a bag. You got to get your things. And so luckily it was already ready.
That's great. So Pamela, in these chats with everyday amazing mamas just like you, I'm really hoping to do a bit of a deep dive into not so much just your birth story, which we will go into, but more about how you felt in the lead up compared to after birth, like how the expectations differed to reality. So, that side of things. So thank you so much for providing your insights as a brand new mama.
No worries.
Let's start at the start. When did the journey begin for you becoming a mother?
Okay, so obviously we got pregnant last year in December and didn't find out until January, when I thought, I knew already, I was like, something's here. I know that I'm pregnant. My body was just a little bit different. And my husband was just eager after a week of me saying, I think I'm pregnant. I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant. He said, that's it. You need to find out tonight. I'd gone away camping, came back. He said, we're going to Woolies, get a pregnancy test. And I was like, I know that I'm pregnant. And so when I did it, it wasn't anything shocking when I saw those two lines. I was like, I knew it. I knew that it would happen. And that's when it started. And January was, exciting because we just thought 2020, it's going to be a fantastic year. Our first baby. Grandparents were super excited.
That's great. And how did you know you were pregnant? How did you get the feeling?
For a couple of years, I'd already started not tracking, by writing it down or anything like that, just by observing my body. But I've been tracking my cervical mucus, looking at the changes that it would, that it happens during the month. My breasts would usually get quite tender and sore in the lead up to my period, but usually it's like, 10 days before, a week before. And just, little things like that. And so this time around, I noticed that my breast went tender like 2 days after I had ovulated, 2 or 3 days. And I thought, no, that's a bit different. I'm meant to have at least another week or so until that happens. My cervical mucus didn't change either. So I was like, oh, that's a little bit weird because normally I notice the differences. And my uterus, my pelvis, I'm not too sure. Normally you can feel, those pre-period cramps like a week before, and then you've got a couple more just a couple of days before. But this one, I started feeling these tightenings, I want to say, or these stretchings quite low. And I thought that's a bit different as well.
Wow, you're really in tune with your body. That's great. Did you have any difficulties falling pregnant?
I wouldn't say it was difficulty in the sense that we had to go through treatments. Our journey was hard in the sense that it wasn't happening as quickly as we thought it would. We thought, okay, we'll just, have unprotected sex and it would be done. We didn't realize that it could take more than a year or 2 or maybe 3 for that to actually happen. And didn't think that so many external factors could have an influence on whether you're ready to have a baby or not.
Yeah. So you sound like you know a lot more now than you did when you first started trying. What did you do to learn more about it all? Was it Googling or did you go and see someone?
So it was more of we're just going to let it happen when it happens. I didn't want to focus too much on trying to make it happen because I knew that I had a lot of stress in my life already. So whether it was, personally or with work, etc., I had high levels of anxiety at one stage, and I knew that has an impact on your body. And I teach psychology as well as a teacher. So this is information that I teach to my students. So I know that so many things can have an impact on what your body can do or not do. So when it came to the pregnancy or trying for it, I knew that my body or my mind was not in conjunction. They were not married well. I think they weren't at peace with each other. And I think that's probably what was having an effect. And I knew that. So I had to see a counselor, go to yoga, meditate, write in my journal, read books, etc., just so that I could start processing all the things that were affecting me in a negative way, all the stresses, so that I could start letting them go. Because I really felt that a lot of it was just held in my body. And it's not until, we went away for 3 months. We went overseas traveling, my husband and I, last year at the start of the year. We came back and things started to fall in place. Just personal stresses started to disappear. Work stresses started to change. The future looked a little bit more certain, a little bit more different. And something happened where I just started to feel more grounded, not so stressed, not so anxious, not so worried about the future. I just started to feel like things were falling into place. And it's almost like my body just said, yep, and you're ready now. Like my mind just calmed and my body just went, okay, you're okay now.
Isn't that amazing? So once you found out you were pregnant, how did life change?
There was like I felt like there was a new purpose. I felt like that thing that I felt was missing, what we'd been trying to achieve for a couple of years of starting a family, it's almost like that hole was no longer, it felt full, and looking towards, the rest of the year and the next couple of years, it felt like I had a new purpose. Whereas before I started to feel not so much loneliness, but that that there was something that wasn't there anymore. Like work wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't fulfilling me in ways that it used to.
Did it feel like a Groundhog Day sort of thing?
Yes, in terms of like the stress. It was just stress and stress and stress and stress. It was the same thing, and I was no longer getting any feeling from it. And so then in January when we found out, it just felt like finally there was a new purpose that I was going to go into, and I was excited. There was like a sense of excitement about starting this family with Juan and all the new things that we get to experience with having a new family member. And that was great. It was a really good feeling.
Yeah, that's lovely. So as the months went by, how did you start to prepare for birth?
I had a fear of labour. Like, I think we've had this conversation. I was like, I don't think I can do this. And it was probably one of the things that I had been putting off, because I knew that once you're pregnant, it has to come out.
Where did that fear come from, do you think?
I feel like it came from high school. I think I was in biology. I remember vividly one biology lesson, and we were watching a labour documentary. And it was that particular day that I think I was feeling quite ill already. And I think I'd made like an association of feeling quite ill, watching this and not being prepared, and remembering just feeling so incredibly like weak, just like, oh my goodness. And then, yes.
Wow. Isn't that amazing that something that happened, maybe 10 minutes that happened when you're a teenager had that lasting effect?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so you were quite anxious about the upcoming birth. Did you do anything to help appease the situation? Or
I started doing affirmations. So I've got like affirmations. You can't see it here, but I've got them posted around, just affirmations that I write. I would make drawings just to kind of process it. I had to start visualizing what it would be like. And it's almost like once I became pregnant, it's almost like an instinct just kind of kicked in. It was like, no, you can do it. It's fine. And when I would visualize it, it was no longer paired with the fear or the that worry that it was going to be so incredibly painful. For some reason, in my mind, when I would think about the labor, I could already imagine the position that I would be in. I could already imagine, being pregnant and pushing my baby out. So it's almost like your body kind of just helps you prepare for it. And so on top of that visualization, I would, and my affirmations, I would talk to my husband about, I'll talk to pretty much everybody about it, their experiences. And then obviously joining Fitness Mama as well. That's one of the things that I felt helped prepare me, because I could talk to you, or I could talk to others and listen to some of the information that you'd provide. And that would just ground me and go, okay, it's normal and it's okay. Was it the pain aspect that worried you the most? I think, yes. I think the pain and, probably the pain. It wasn't even so much the pain of contraction or anything like that. It was just the idea of such a large body will be coming out of my vagina, and that pain associated from what I've seen. And I think that's where it comes from what I've seen previously and from what you hear, these horror stories of absolute traumatizing pain. I thought,
So you mentioned it was helpful to speak to others about their birth experience. Like, how did you find that was helpful? One thing about these sessions is that it's quite an interesting balance, because yes, you do want to show a whole broad range of childbirths and scenarios, but you also don't want to increase anyone's fear aspect as well. So how did you feel listening to other people's birth stories?
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit visit www.babybeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
I felt comfortable, strangely enough, because I would only choose the people that I felt comfortable talking to. And I knew that the people that were sharing with me their stories, they weren't expressing it as something so traumatizing, excruciating, horrible. They would tell me in really positive ways, yeah, it's hard and yes, it hurts, but, this or, this experience, your body knows what to do. And I felt like that reassurance eased my anxieties around it, because they weren't telling me, they weren't expressing it in a way that was negative or horrible in that way. So I felt like that for me eased me into it.
Oh, that's great. So could you tell us a little bit about what your plans were, or did you have a birth plan?
No birth plan, because in Fitness Mama we spoke about having a birth map instead of a birth plan. I'm already quite a control freak. I like things organized, and I knew that having a plan was not going to be helpful for me in terms of if changes were to occur, I had to adapt. So no birth plan, and essentially probably not even a birth map, because I thought I'd had time to get myself ready once I started my maternity leave.
Yep, and then that didn't happen.
No, it didn't.
Okay, so could you tell us a bit about your childbirth experience then? So you went into hospital at 35 weeks. What made you go into hospital?
So I woke up on a Saturday morning at 7, went to the bathroom, and I felt like I was still urinating afterwards. I went back to bed and I thought, this is a bit weird. I feel like there's more water, like there's urine leaking. And I went back to the toilet and it just started gushing out. And it was 34 weeks and 5 days. And I knew that something wasn't right. I'm at 34 weeks. This is not normal. So called my husband. He was on his way to work. He was getting ready for work. And I called him up and said, what is leaking? And we called the hospital and they said, okay, just, put on clothes, come straight to the hospital. We'll check you out. And so we went to the Ruby Mercy, and luckily it's, around the corner for us. And went there, and Juan couldn't come in because of the restrictions. And so he had to stay outside, and I had to go in, and they had to ask me all these questions about my pregnancy, and everything had been going smoothly with the pregnancy. There were no issues at all. And they had to monitor the baby's heart rate, which was perfect. The baby was super happy. But yes, my amniotic fluid was gushing out. So they call it a premature rupture of the membrane. And they had to check my cervix, and they were like, no, you're fine. Your cervix is fine. So you're not going into labor, but we still need to monitor you for 2 days.
And then you never came out of hospital?
No, I didn't. I stayed there.
So what happened in those 2 days?
In those 2 days, amniotic fluid kept leaking, kept coming out. They put me into the maternity ward, and I had to get antibiotics. I was on a drip because I didn't want an infection. And they just kept checking baby's heart rate. They just kept checking, how I was going. And everything was okay up until the Monday where I thought I was going home, because they were really, really trying to get me to go home. They really were encouraging me to go home, come back at 37 weeks at least to have the baby, because it was still quite little.
Were you still leaking?
Yes.
After a day or so?
Yeah, still leaking. It was nonstop. And then it would change in colour as well. So that's where I'd get a little bit worried, because it would go in a pinkish colour. And so that's where I think they were quite mindful. And by Monday, I had an ultrasound, and there was not a lot of amniotic fluid left inside. So there was a very, very small portion of it. And then blood test came back, and it showed that I had a really high count of white blood cells. So now the doctors were saying, so you're on antibiotics, but it's still coming up with high white blood cells. So we're not sure if you have an infection or not. So we can't send you home. So you have to stay. So we need to give you another round of antibiotics again. So I stayed Tuesday. And by Tuesday, so after a lot of crying, like, I just want to go home. Is everything okay? Is my baby fine? Baby was perfect. The whole entire time, baby was not in any type of distress. But by Tuesday, I remember thinking, I'm not leaving the hospital. Like, I'm not going home. It's not happening. I'm not going to go home for 2 weeks, leaking this amount of fluid. I can't make it to 2 weeks. He's not going to have anything there. And I remember thinking, the baby's going to be born this week. It has to. And by Tuesday night, because I was already starting to feel like cramps in my belly towards my back. And I remember feeling that, like, here and there Sunday, here and there on Monday. Tuesday, they started to get a little bit stronger. And every time they would connect the CTG scan on me to check the baby's heart rate, the CTG scan wouldn't pick up the contractions because they were too small, they were too low. But I could feel them coming and going, and I could feel like they were just getting tighter or more intense, like period cramps in my pelvis. And by Tuesday night, went to sleep, and 10 o'clock at night time, they just started to come stronger and stronger and stronger. And the CTG scan still wouldn't pick them up. They're like, no, you're not in labor. They're just false contractions. And the doctor came in and they checked me, and they're like, no, you're funneling. So your cervix is still long and closed, but you are funneling. And it's not a labor. You're not in pre-labor or anything like that. It's just the false contractions. Go have a shower. That usually will stop it. And so I had a shower at that time. I felt a little bit better, and they kept coming. And so then by this stage, I was already writing them down on my notebook, because they were coming every 15 minutes, and then every 7 minutes, and then every 5 minutes.
You knew, didn't you?
I absolutely did. I was like, don't try and tell me these are false contractions. I don't care if the machine's not picking it up. I can feel it. This is not normal. And so then about maybe 3 a.m, they came and checked me again. And they're like, look, we can't do anything about it. We'll give you some pain meds just so that you can go to sleep. And so then it calmed down. I thought, oh, thank God they've stopped. I finally went to sleep on the Wednesday morning and woke up to more contractions.
So for 3 to 4 days, you weren't having great.
Oh, no, absolutely not. No.
And this is before baby has even arrived.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then by Wednesday morning, I woke up at about 8 or something, proceeded, the morning as usual, had breakfast. The pains were still there. I was like, midwife, I need you to check me again because these are coming on strong. And so then the doctor came again. I had many doctors come and go. And a different doctor came, and they did an ultrasound. They said, okay, baby's in position, head's really, really low. And they did a speculum, and they checked me. And I remember she just pulled out 3 fingers, and she's like, you're 3 centimeters dilated. And I was like,
I told you.
Like, off to the birthing suite for you. You're in labor. And I was like, I've been telling you this for like 2 days.
Did that feel good to finally be told that?
1,000% yes. It was the best relief ever. I just needed it to end, because I thought, I cannot go back home for 2 weeks feeling these contractions and the leakage and the worry that something's not right. So when she said off to the birthing suite, I never thought that I would be so pleased to hear those words, that you're going to go have this baby, because I just needed the baby out. I was like, it's got to happen.
Amazing. So keep talking. How was the rest? How did the childbirth happen?
So we walked over to the birthing suite, and by this stage I had already called my husband a couple of times. I had FaceTimed him.
How often could he come into the hospital?
He could only come in for 2 hours a day. Yeah. So that would, and just another added stress on top of everything, that you couldn't have any visitors, and the only visitor you could have was your partner or your labour partner. So yeah, 2 hours a day wasn't helpful. And so I had FaceTimed him during that night saying, it's going to happen. Like, you're going to come to the hospital. This baby's coming. And by that stage, when they said, yeah, you're going to the birthing suite, I called them. I said, no, now it's definitely happening. I'm going to the birthing suite. You need to get here. And so we walked over to the birthing suite, and they carried all my things for me, and we get to the room, and it was just like, and this is the room. It was a lovely room. They had affirmations around the wall. It was soft, dim light. They had a little exercise ball. They had a nice little squishy mat that I could kind of stand on, and it was lovely. It was, and the midwives, the midwives at Werribee Mercy, I cannot say anything negative. They were excellent. And so I went in and they were just so beautiful. They're like, right, we're just going to check the baby. You're okay. Excellent. They're like, all right, well, we'll just, we'll just hang out here. And so that's where it started. So I started to, while I was waiting for Juan to come to the hospital, I started to FaceTime my best friends. I started to FaceTime some other friends because I'd always said to them, we're doing this together. I'm not doing this on my own. I'm calling you because my dream, not my dream, but the idea that I had at the beginning was that my mother would be there and my best friend would be there. She's a midwife as well. And for me, my ideal scenario would be to have women present in the birthing suite with me to help. I don't know why that's what I thought and that's what I wanted, but that's the feeling. So I called them up. I had this chat with my best friends and I'm going through my contractions, holding onto the bed and looking at this camera all crazy-eyed, going, yeah, I'm okay, it's all good, no dramas, and having a laugh. And then I would call my parents and my parents were ecstatic that, I'm in labour holding onto my belly going, yeah, keep talking to me, just keep distracting me. And then Juan came, we called another friend and we just did that for a little bit. And I had my affirmations on the bed. I looked at all my affirmations that I had made and they quickly disappeared because after a while, I don't care about the affirmations. And that's how it proceeded. Juan was there and I felt calmer. We had some lunch and and it was good. It was a good feeling to be in that situation.
And what about towards the end of the labour?
This is where things get a little bit blurry, with time, like you kind of forget what happens. So things started to progress, the intensity of the contractions started to increase. And at first they were like, no, I can, they were strong. I could breathe through it. Just, kept telling myself, this is how it's meant to feel. This is how it's meant to feel. Just breathe through it. They gave me the gas and I was like, this is not help. This is just air. This is just air. This is a placebo. You're tricking me into thinking that this is actually helping. And by a couple of hours in, I was like, okay, I need another option. What else is there besides the medicine ball that I was, bouncing on? They're like, okay, you've got this option. You've got morphine. You've got water syringe injections. Have you heard of those, the water injections?
Yeah, I haven't heard much from people who have used it. Did you try it?
Oh, yes, I did. I hadn't heard of them. One of the midwives the day before had explained to me what are the options for pain relief, and she didn't mention this. So when this midwife was like, oh, no, there are water injections, I was like, oh, this is nice. And they're like, it's completely safe and completely natural. It's just water that's being pushed into your back because I was having a lot of back pain. And so they said, look, there are 4 needles that go in your back. But they will release water and it will just spread and it will ease the pain that you're feeling. And by that stage, I was like, sure, of course, it's natural. Let's do it. And they came in and another midwife came in and she says, her name was Deb, and she says, Simone, just got to let you know that they hurt like a buggery. And I was like, okay, they hurt like a buggery. Hey, she's like, they hurt like a buggery. And I said, all right, let's do it. And so they're like, breathe through the gas. And I bent over the bed. And they're like, we're going to do this now. 2 women injecting 4 needles into my back. Kath, I have never felt such pain in my life. This was not hurt like a buggery. It felt like they were jabbing something into my bones. It was horrible. And that's where my vocabulary, like that's when I was like, everything came out of my mouth in that moment. They said that it's akin to getting stung by a wasp. I've never been stung by a wasp, so I don't know. I've got no reference. But those 4 needles going in, they were super, super painful. It made the epidural when I got that done a breeze. I was like, nothing.
So what about the effects of the water syringe?
If supposedly in the moment, the midwife told me afterwards that I said that it was good, that it was working. If I look back on it now, I go, oh, the effect was okay. I wouldn't say that it was absolutely incredible. It did minimize what I was feeling in the back. But what happened was I then started to feel all the pain at the front. So the back started to, I guess, it was alleviated, but then I started to get the contractions, and maybe the contractions were always there, but I wasn't paying attention to them. But then I just felt them more at the front. So I lasted a couple of hours like that. Sorry, go.
And I wonder if those injections, different people have different responses.
From what the midwife has said to me, she said, oh, look, one lady swore by and said that they were fantastic for her contractions and her pain. But then when I spoke to the other midwife who told me about the pain relief and didn't mention it, I said, why didn't you tell me about the water injection? She goes, yeah, because I know that they don't work. And I was like...
Okay, so you ended up going for the epidural, it sounds like, afterwards.
Yes. By 6 o'clock, I think I was quite knackered and the contractions were getting really intense. Like I was grabbing my husband by the shirt, like bringing him down, going, oh. And then I said, okay, what's my next option? They said morphine or epidural. And I was like, give me the epidural. Like I'm exhausted. And my husband turns to me and he's like, are you sure you want to go for the epidural? And I turned to him and I said, are you kidding me? And so they checked me and they're like, you're 6 centimeters dilated. And I was like, 6 centimeters. It's 6 o'clock. I've been like this since 10 the night before. I was like, go for it, do the epidural. All of that's a new little, another situation to go through. And once that kicked in though, it was absolute bliss. Like I thought this is what a drug addict feels like, having heroin for the first time. Like it felt so good to just finally relax and be able to breathe. And I feel like that's when I started to really, really enjoy the process, because I was no longer clenching. I was no longer tense. It just made me feel present, which was strange. I felt present. And although I could still feel the pressure and I could feel my cervix opening, I couldn't feel pain. And I could have stayed there forever. I kept swaying my hips around. I was just in a state of kind of like bliss of just, this is great. Had a nap. It was good.
So that happened at 6 a.m., did you say?
6 p.m.
So it'd been a good 8 hours.
With that, yes. And we're not considering the night before. So when it first started at
the 4 nights before.
The 4 nights before. And then with the epidural, it was excellent. But now I realize that, there's always going to be there are pros and cons. And I think one of the cons with the epidural is that because you can't feel the pressure towards the end, I couldn't feel the pressure. It was quite difficult for me to try and push. So when they woke me up and they said, okay, it's time for you to push. It was like 7 p.m. by this stage. It's time for you to push. It's almost like I couldn't connect my mind to my body to tell myself, you need to push in this particular area. So they kept saying, push, you can push now. Push as if, you need to go to the bathroom. And I was like, am I doing that? I don't know is that what I'm doing? Am I going okay? And no. So we changed positions. I went on all fours because that's how I imagined that I felt comfortable doing it. And again, I felt comfortable. I was happy, content to just sway my hips, open them up as much as I could, try and push when I felt any level of pressure, but nothing was happening. And they also had said that baby's head was a little bit tilted up, so it wasn't in a full correct position from my understanding. And I was like that. I don't know how long time passed because I didn't understand how much time had passed, but my heart rate started to shoot up, and then the midwife started to get really concerned. And she said, okay, I'm really getting worried now that your heart rate is skyrocketing, and this is going to start having an effect on the baby, and you really need to, push this baby out. And I tried, and it wasn't happening. And then the doctor came in and he was getting concerned. And then obviously when someone is concerned and they're an expert in this area, you try and stay calm, but you can't help but then start to feel worried. And my husband started to get worried. And I looked at my husband and he started to get really, really worried. And that started to actually get me worried. I thought, oh, something's not right here. And then I started to get quite scared. And things turned a little bit south there in the sense that it had gone from such like a calm, soft space of like everything's nice to we need to get the baby out now. We need to sit you up, legs in stirrups. We need to use the forceps. If this doesn't happen, we're then going to have to move you into theatre and we'll have to perform a C-section. And I think that kind of put me into a level of shock of, birth map, no plan. It was like, I can't control this. You need to do whatever you have to do. Get the baby out. And that's what happened, and things changed. And, the lights were turned on, more people started to come in, there were instruments about. And I think I went into a level of shock of, whoa, this was a drastic change. And I knew logically it had to happen because it's now my safety and baby safety. Emotionally, I knew that this was something that I was going to have to process a lot later, because it just was a very rapid change to what I was experiencing. So they had to use the forceps. Thankfully, because of the epidural, I felt nothing. So that was always an absolute plus. And then, baby's head was pulled out. And then they said, okay, now try and push the rest of the baby. And again, I was like, am I pushing the baby? I don't know if I'm pushing the baby. And then, supposedly I did. And they held him up and he was, right in front of me. And I was in another level of shock. Like, I just entered layers of shock. I was like, oh my God, this has just happened.
And did you know you're having a little boy?
No. Another shock. Kath, I seriously thought it was going to be a girl. From the beginning, from before I got pregnant, I had a dream that it was a girl. I kept dreaming that it was a girl. And so when they had put him on me, I was already in shock. And they put him on me and they said, oh, we've got to find out the gender. And I was like, the gender? And they lifted him up and I saw penis and testicles. And I went into another shock. I was like, it's a boy. And it was crazy. It was crazy.
Wow. And how was Juan feeling through all this?
From my memory, I think he was, very calm, very supportive, excellent. He then obviously got concerned with the heart rate, and then he started to panic when he saw the forceps. That was a shock to him. But once the baby came out and I looked towards him, he was crying and laughing because our Gabriel was crying with his hand in his face. And Juan just kept laughing because the baby was just so dramatic with his hand in his face. And so he was ecstatic. So I think all the fear had just disappeared in that moment.
Oh, sweet. So going back to the forceps, how do you feel your recovery has been?
Oh, yeah. Harder, I would say. There's already so much stretching that happened and the use of the forceps. Oh, they had to cut me as well. So that's just another added bonus to that. And so the recovery, in my mind, and this is something that we probably don't speak about, is the recovery, how long it actually takes or how long it could take. In my mind, I just thought, okay, I would heal and, I'd proceed. I just didn't think that 2 months later I would still be feeling a little bit tender. I didn't think that walking would be such a struggle straight away.
And tenderness down in that perineal area where the episiotomy was, you mean?
Yeah. So, and I think it's sometimes like because we're walking, obviously with Gabriel, it's our outing. And if I walk a couple of kilometers, I can feel it either later that night or the next day. It just feels a little bit, it's like, when you've got a scar and you can sometimes feel it throb. It's just like sometimes it just feels tender. And I'm not sure if it's like because I'm overworking the muscle or I haven't done enough pelvic floor exercise to strengthen it, or I'm walking too much.
And the wound's healed, okay?
No, the wound's excellent.
Have you tried anything like episiotomy scar massage or?
No, I haven't.
No. Okay. Inside the membership, we've got something coming up soon that might be useful for you. So stay tuned. That's sort of diverting a little bit. So I know we've chatted a lot about the childbirth aspect, but what I'd love to know is how, now that you've been through childbirth and now that you're a mum of a beautiful little boy, how is the reality of being a mum versus what you had envisioned?
Very different. Extremely different. I can't believe how different it is. I think when you're pregnant, maybe the baby hormones, happy hormones, tell you that it's going to be absolute bliss and you're going to be so in love and it's just, you're going to be breastfeeding and all that. And the reality is it's extremely exhausting and overwhelming and it is hard. And there's a lot to process. The amount of emotions that you feel afterwards is incredible, and how much processing of what you've experienced is insane. And I think the reality is a bit more shocking. Maybe in my experience, other people experience things differently. I think my experience is different as well. It was a lot more shocking than I anticipated.
So in hindsight, do you think you could have done anything different
differently to maybe prepare for motherhood?
I couldn't have done anything differently because I couldn't control that Gabriel came early. If he hadn't have come early and he had come at 38 weeks or 40 weeks as, intended or wanted, you know what? On that Friday, the day before that my membranes ruptured, I was looking at hypnobirthing Australia, because I thought I'll do this course, I'll go into it and I'll look at calm birthing, etc. So I thought, I'll have 4 weeks to get myself kind of prepared for it. And but because he came early and it was so unexpected, I had no preparation.
Do you think that affected?
Absolutely, 1,000%. Just because there was so much uncertainty surrounding it, and so much worry and anxiety and stress. So I think for me, in that particular circumstance, the rupturing of the membrane, staying in hospital for 5 days, not having Juan there because of the restrictions, new restrictions coming into place on the day that he was born, not having visitors, not seeing people, you can't leave the house, etc. The forceps, the episiotomy, all of those things. He had to stay in hospital for a week in the special care nursery. So 2 days later, I came home, but he had to stay in the hospital, and we couldn't actually go and see him together. It was only one parent at the one time, so we were never actually together as a family. So all of these factors played a massive part in how I dealt with becoming a mum at the beginning.
And do you think there's a bit of an accumulative stress sort of situation?
Absolutely, yeah. Probably a bit of trauma as well, quite a bit of anxiety. I felt like I missed out on the bonding experience with my baby, because once he was born, he was on me, but then they had to whisk him away to the special care nursery. So while Juan went with Gabriel, I was there being, stitched up and fixed up and getting more drips and antibiotics and this and that, and getting talked at by so many people, and I was exhausted. And I think not having that time with Gabriel for that first 8 weeks, like other mothers probably would, at home with their husband, etc., I feel like that really put me into a state of shock again.
And how did you find breastfeeding in those early days?
I felt like,
because you weren't actually with Gabriel.
Yeah, and funny, what? I feel like with breastfeeding, it's almost like I took it upon myself as the one thing that I could control, because there was so much uncertainty in the lead up to this, and then so much uncertainty whilst he was away of, is he okay? Is he going to grow, et cetera, et cetera. And with the breastfeeding, it was like, this is one thing that I can actually do. I can do it. And it's almost like I told myself, you will breastfeed him because this is what you can do, that I would just produce milk like in abundance. Like I could feed the nation with my breast. I was just pumping so much milk that 3 days later I had heaps of milk to give him.
Okay. So you were pumping and then taking that milk into the hospital, and in that 2-hour period, were you able to breastfeed him?
Yeah, we did try. But he was so little. He was 2.2 kilos. He was tiny, and his head was so little and his mouth was so little, and my breast was ginormous like a rock melon. So he did his best. He would try and suckle as best as he could, but they would obviously have to give him a bottle of, at first, formula, and then they would start giving or introducing the breast milk through a bottle.
And so when he came home from hospital, had you managed to breastfeed with him? Was he big enough to breastfeed then?
A little. He was. So I had a consultant, I had a lactation consultant come in on one of the days that we had visited. And so she helped me in terms of the position, et cetera. And she said, look, he's getting there. It's just because he's so little. But by the time that I came home, so 8 days later, he came, I did breastfeed him that day. So he was able to latch on. It's probably not the best latch. And there has been some latching difficulty because of how small his mouth was and his sucking reflex. But it was something that I persisted with, and because I knew how important it was to have him on me and near me after those days that we weren't together.
Oh, well, that's great that side of things has worked out well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That must be a relief for you. You've mentioned a little bit about your challenges in those first 8 weeks. Do you feel a bit better? Are things coming along? Do you feel you have the support you need?
Absolutely. I feel like at the beginning, because of the stress and the trauma of what I had to go through for those particular days and processing everything, I had to talk a lot about it. I had to really open myself up and talk and cry a lot and process as much as I had to with my family. And I felt that there came a point where I was getting quite overwhelmed with being a 24/7 mum. Like, he's dependent on me for everything. And there was a stage where he just kept eating and eating, and my breast was just so sore. And I had to make a decision to go into formula just to, one here and there, just so that I could have a break, so that Juan could help out, et cetera, et cetera. And then came a day where I said, I need to leave the house. Like, I can't stay in the house. It's been 6 weeks of me being in the house. My parents come over nearly every day to help. I need to go. And also, it was for me to kind of regain my motherhood. Like Juan has said, I feel like you're relying on me to do everything, because I was so anxious. I had lost my confidence in myself completely because of so much uncertainty. And he said, you need to regain your motherhood. You've got to take the reins of it. And I did. I thought, I'm taking the car. I'm going. I'm leaving the house. I took the car. I took him, and I went to my parents' house. And then I had done that every day since, because it was just my way of saying, no, I can do this. And that, for my mental health, really helped. The fact that I could leave, become more independent, become mother of Gabriel, and not have that kind of victim mentality that things weren't working out the way that I wanted. I just thought, yeah.
Yeah. So for you, that ability to get in the car and drive somewhere was a real milestone for you.
At 100,000,000%, yes. Yeah. And then just go to my parents' house after 6 weeks of being encapsulated in our own house and feeling like I couldn't do anything because I was still recovering. The idea that I could drive by myself and walk out and go to my parents' house and be there and come home at whatever hour I wanted just made me feel like me again. I was like, oh, I got my confidence back.
And I think that does happen with time too. So that's great. Thank you for sharing all that, Pamela. I know it's quite a intimate story, and sometimes I guess a bit emotional. Going on to a little bit of a different topic now. As I said, you were one of the founding members of Fitness Mama, and I know you did an incredible job staying fit and active in those early days before you went into early labour, I should say. So why did you decide that Fitness Mama might be good for you?
I felt like I needed to change my mindset around pregnancy and childbirth. I needed to have more of a positive mind, take away the fear from it. And I knew that one of the ways for me to let go of fears and to help me deal with those fears is to be open and honest and communicate with others. Sharing the stories or sharing the fears makes it less fearful for you. And so I think with Fitness Mama, because you've designed a program, I guess, to help us feel empowered and to see childbirth as something as, you can do it and the body knows how to do it and you've got the capability of doing it. Great, gain the knowledge and you're set with these skills. And I feel like what better way to prepare myself with gaining skills. So I felt like Fitness Mama was a safe environment for me to ask questions, receive information, resources, etc.
So for those that don't know, there are different modules inside Fitness Mama. There's a confident core where you learn about your pelvic floor and abdominal muscles. Then there's a pregnancy module where you learn about the effects of pregnancy on your body, such as abdominal muscle separation and that side of things. And then what Pamela's talking about is the childbirth module, where there's a lot of guest speakers with different topics, including how to prepare for a positive experience and tips about induction. There's a psychologist that gives some information, all sorts of different health professionals. So now that you've had your baby and you're 2 months after birth, what would be your biggest goals in terms of your body's recovery?
I would love nothing more than to go for a swim or a run, just to be able to do things that I could do before, lift something heavier. That would be great, just because it does take its toll on your body. And things like walking was such an achievement. Walking 3 kilometers, I cried afterwards because I was like, I couldn't do this, for 6 weeks.
And you couldn't walk for 6 weeks because of the pain you were feeling?
It's just like a discomfort. So the pain lasted maybe 2 weeks. And once that healed, it's fine. It's just a discomfort. It's just, like I was saying before, it just get tender, or if I overwalk, I can feel just a bit, it's not a pressure, it's just a bit of, it just feels like it's not 100% healed. It's like having a bit of a neck pain.
Well, that's great. Everything is slowly improving and your body is slowly recovering, and you are only 8 weeks after birth. I like to think about those first 6 weeks as 6 weeks of rest and recovery after childbirth. So some cultures, I think, do it so well where for 6 weeks after birth, the whole sort of village surrounds them and brings the mother the food on the plate, and her only job is to be with the baby, breastfeed, and she doesn't have to do anything else. Whereas in our culture, generally, 2 weeks after childbirth, our partner might be back at work. We might be back at the supermarket with toddler on one hip and pushing a trolley with the other arm. So I think in general our society doesn't really help with mum's recovery in those early 6 weeks, but then also months down the track. So you're just sort of coming out of that newborn haze at the moment, and now you're beginning to think, oh, I would love to be able to swim and run. And you probably weren't thinking about that a few weeks ago because you were right in the thick of it. So it's this next few months for you that's so important to get that, just gradually get back into rehab and gradually regain your strength so that you're not doing anything too much too soon. You're not overloading your body. You're letting it heal. It takes 9 months for it to get, for pregnancy to happen. And then I like to think of the next 9 months as the recovery phase, 9 to 12 months at least. So you're only early days and you've done an amazing job, Pamela.
Thank you, Kath. And you know what, Kath? You're spot on by saying that it takes 9 months to have this baby and then another 9 months to get yourself. But you don't think that. You don't feel like you merit or deserve to have that time afterwards. It's so strange. You just think, like you said, you've got to go to the supermarket. And I look back now and I go, yeah, it's been 8 weeks and it has felt like a long time. But at the same time, you go, no, 8 weeks is nothing considering what you've just gone through physically and emotionally. And so now that I've gone through it, I think I'll be kind to myself the next time and say, no, for 6 weeks, you will do nothing. And that I was pretty dependent on Juan and doing a lot of things, but even so, I still try to walk when I go, maybe that wasn't a good idea.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I was the same for my first child. The whole concept of not doing much for 6 weeks and recovering and healing, it's such a foreign concept. And I know I did too much in the early days after my first. And with each, I've had 3 children now, and with each baby, I've done less in those first 6 weeks. And I feel with each baby, I've recovered better. I don't know whether it's us putting the pressure on ourselves or what it is about society, but we do too much. So everyone has the green light to not feel like they have to get out and about. Like some women need to for their own mental health, and it's great to get out and do a little 5-10 minute walk or whatever they can feel like their body can manage. But it's an interesting one and I don't have an answer for it. But so to finish up, now that you're a fresh new mama, what words of wisdom do you have to pregnant mamas out there who are about to give birth and go through a similar sort of experience or a different sort of experience? Who knows what it will be like?
I tell you this all the time. You can't control it. It's all about the baby. You can't control it. Try and be open to anything possible, because when you think that it won't happen to you, bam, it happens. And you're not ready mentally to accept those changes. You can't adapt or be flexible. Try and be adaptable. I don't know. Try and be flexible to changes.
And how about, because you did find those first few weeks quite tough in terms of the fact that it was an earlier birth than you envisioned and your baby was in the special care nursery and you were tired and all those sorts of things. Is there anything in hindsight that you could have done to perhaps feel like
those first few weeks could have been a bit easier, or because we always talk about childbirth, but what about when you were feeling a bit overwhelmed afterwards?
And I know for me that I put such a huge weight on the childbirth that I look back and I go, it was a blip. It was nothing in comparison to what you experience afterwards and the emotions and the thoughts that you have. I think it would be to say to yourself, anything that you think and feel is okay. It's all right. You're allowed to, you deserve, entitled, you merit any thought and feeling. It's completely normal. And if you need to cry, cry. If you want to feel. If you want to think. Talk about it as much as you can. Allow yourself to process anything that goes into your mind and give yourself that time, and it's okay. That's probably what I would say.
I love it. I think you've certainly touched on something there. I think that's some great piece of wisdom. So thank you so much for joining me today, Pamela. I really do appreciate it.
You're more than welcome, Kath.
It's a great story you've got to tell, and you've brought some great insight into an amazing experience in your life and also a challenging experience. So thank you very much.
No worries at all.
And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links at fitnessmama.com/podcast. And thanks again for sharing this episode and this podcast with any of your friends or family members who might be pregnant or planning a pregnancy, or perhaps they've recently had a baby. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Come and send a message to me on Instagram at fitnessmama. I'd love to hear a little bit about you and hear about your journey, and tell me how many weeks pregnant you are or how old your baby is. I really do love all those stories and those conversations that do happen inside the DMs. That's it, everyone. Have a lovely day, and I will see you very soon for another episode of the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer: materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'll see you soon.